Revolutionary greetings, comrades. This is part of our political education as we continue to recruit new members into the Zimbabwe Communist Party. I must admit that we have comrades who are showing interest in joining the party. Our revolutionary task is to guide them ideologically. You remember that the Communist Party is different from other formations. You do not just buy a membership card over a counter, or you do not stand at a street corner, simple sign up people, give their membership cards, and that's it. And they are full members of the party. We explained that we have what we call candidate member. These are comrades that undergo induction, candidate members of the party, before they become full members of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. So it is important that we continue to guide them ideologically as part of induction, and this video is for them. A video is good in that they will keep it as a reference point. We are also seeing a new tendency among our members where reading is becoming a problem. Comrades spend more time watching different videos on YouTube. They find it easier to follow a political education when a video is recorded. And we have many comrades that are following, of course, which is good, political education programs on social media. Comrades are sharing that videos as part of their political education. So today we want to look into Ujamma, a socialist concept that was implemented in Tanzania under the leadership of the late President Julius Nyerere. The reason why we are doing this is because when we discuss about socialism, comrades always make Tanzania and the other countries as a reference point to say socialism failed. So if socialism failed in some countries, will it succeed in Zimbabwe? And of course there are some who mistaken national planning as a socialist program. We implemented national planning in the 80s, first decade of our independence, which of course was started by the Rhodesians. The neoliberals will always say, no, comrades, socialism in Zimbabwe failed. The reason why the economy of Zimbabwe collapsed is because of a socialist program implemented in the 80s. And we have demonstrated that socialism was never implemented in Zimbabwe. What was there was national planning, which was then abandoned for a neoliberal policy in 1991, known as Economic Structural Adjustment Program. So Ujamma was implemented in the 60s. As soon as Tanzania gained her independence, Ujamma as a socialist concept was implemented. But it is important to point out that the liberation movements were led by African elites. Nothing wrong with that, because they were trusted in communities. Nothing wrong with that. But it is important to note that they did not believe in the socialist ideology or scientific socialism as a guiding ideology. And the liberation movements in the main, they were broad in character. They were not socialist, though they were biased towards the working class and the peasant, but they were not socialist. Indeed, they sang and shouted socialist slogans. And most of them did this because it was the socialist bloc, as we refer to them, who provided military support and also provided other practical support, solidarity to the liberation movement in the struggle against colonialism. So, to impress the socialist bloc countries, they had to shout and sing socialist songs, but that did not make them socialist. This is why post-liberation, they were quick to run to the West, establish relations with the West. In Zimbabwe, we only established diplomatic relations with the USSR. I think it was 1981 or 82. It took longer for us because ZANU-PF, the party that had won elections in 1980, did not have a relationship with the Soviet Union, something that we'll discuss later, or we've already discussed it in previous videos. So, because a number of leaders in the liberation movement were not socialist, only driven by the material support that was provided by the socialist bloc, it left few individuals in the liberation movement who embraced the ideology of scientific socialism. This was the case in Tanzania during the implementation of Ujamma, where President Nyerere took on the drive for socialism single-handedly, because the majority in his party did not believe in the socialist program or in the ideology. So inside the ruling party, there was no inner group around the president committed to socialism. So the first mistake in the implementation of Ujamma was that it was not a collective effort by the party. It was driven by an individual, in this case, the president. And everyone was expected to toe the line. So when you have an individual or few individuals in the party that drive the ideology, the program will not succeed. You will know that we always talk about working as a collective, because the ideology is not for an individual. It is a party ideology. So the first mistake was it was the president who believed in socialism. And there was no inner group or a core group within the ruling party, meaning there was no board of thinking within the ruling party. You need to have in the party, if you are to implement this program, comrades that will do research, do scientific analysis on the local conditions, international trends, and an individual cannot do this alone. So in the absence of a leadership pulling together, Ujamma ran into problems because it became an individual concept. We're raising this so that we avoid also the mistake in the Zimbabwe Communist Party, where scientific socialism is understood by few comrades and the rest just join the Zimbabwe Communist Party because they see it as an alternative, or they love the work that is done by some comrades in the party and communities. I've met quite a number of people who say, we are impressed by the work that you do. Therefore, we want to join the party that you belong to. There's nothing wrong with that, because in any case, a communist does not proclaim that they are communists. You don't climb on a hilltop and proclaim that you are a communist. Your work should speak for itself. And the people in communities would then ask, what party do you belong to? You say, I'm a communist. And then people will say, well, even if we do not understand what communism is, but given the work that you do in communities, we want to belong to this party that you belong to. So once people say that, and they then join the party, it is critical that they are placed as candidate members. They undergo induction, and they understand scientific socialism as a guiding ideology. If I were to make an example with the church, people go to church for different reasons. Someone would be lonely at home, then he goes to church, maybe to see a beautiful lady in church, then they decide to go to church. I'm saying a beautiful lady because in Africa, it is men that chase after women. It is not the norm that the women chase after men. So a person will see a beautiful lady going to church, and they will also go to church trying to impress the lady. That does not make them Christian. They will join the church choir just to impress the lady. But some in the process, they get converted. So it does not mean that every Saturday or Sunday, Saturday for the SDA members and the Sunday for other church organizations, when you see people carrying their purpose going to church, it doesn't mean that all of them are Christians. People go to church for different reasons. So in the case of the party, you will have people coming to join the party for different reasons. We also have beautiful ladies as communists. So some will be coming to say maybe if they come and join us, they might be lucky and fall in love with the beautiful ladies in the Communist Party. And you know we believe in communist love. So we therefore need to guide these comrades that come to join for one reason or another. Some are driven by our colors. They love red because it is beautiful, and they love the work that we do in communities. We must raise their class consciousness. We must put them through induction. And of course, as communists, as members of the party, we do not stop learning. This is why it's critical that inside the party and in communities, we carry out educational programs. So there was no board of thinking within the ruling party in Tanzania during the implementation of Ujamma. There was no working class agitation. People were moved to villages. Of course, President Nyerere said, either you become a worker or a peasant. But the question is, working for who? These were the challenges that were faced by the ruling party in the implementation of Ujamma. There was no militant peasantry. There was no popular expectation for popular change. So this became the ideology of the president, which guided or determined government policy. Once we have an individual guiding government policy in the party, it becomes problematic. Now, people were moved to villages. Ujamma villages were created. Let me quote here. Nyerere stressed that Ujamma villages will be introduced only on a voluntary basis, close quote. So the Arusha Declaration, which was adopted as a guide to the implementation of Ujamma, resolved that Ujamma villages had to be created. And initially it was thought that it was going to be a voluntary exercise where people would simply move to villages. And the one mistake that was made, which we noted in the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, completing the liberation of Zimbabwe at our first Congress in Bulawayo 2019, is that scientific socialism is a science. Our ideology is a science. Socialism is a science. You do not command. You are familiar in Zimbabwe, there's command agriculture, command economy. Now is a command gold coins, which we spoke about in the previous video. You don't command. We said in our program that conditions at present do not allow us to transit to socialism. We need to build a national democratic economy. In the process of building a national democratic economy, we need to organize workers and peasantry. Workers must belong to trade unions, progressive trade unions. And in cases where there are no progressive trade unions, it becomes the task of communists to establish such unions. So workers and the peasant must be prepared. We must prepare them for socialism. We need to build what we call socialist blocks. That involves raising the class consciousness of workers and peasantry as part of our preparation for the next stage of human development, which we said, as we defined, socialism. Let me just remind comrades here briefly what we said when we defined socialism. I quote from our educational material says, quote, it is the next stage of development after capitalism, characterized by the social ownership of the means of production. In the early stages, particularly through national state ownership of the commanding heights of the economy. Cooperatives are another form of social ownership. For socialism to become the predominant mode of production in any country, the working class must gain hegemony over the state. Close quote. So, as we transit to socialism, we cannot do so if the working class and peasant are not prepared, if we did not prepare them for such a transition. We gave an example about one country in South America. A socialist party had come into power. In the name of socialism, they had to distribute head of cake to communities, giving villagers head of cake, saying this is socialism, everyone must have a cake, a head of cake, we are all equal. And the people were not prepared for such. And when we did not prepare people for such, Naturally, people had the Christmas day every day. Every day became a Christmas. People slaughtered the beasts. They ate the meat. In no time, the head of cattle were gone. And we know what happened. Because these cattle did not fall from the sky, or they were not a manna from heaven. So there was no proper program to prepare the masses. So that was the challenge with Ujamma in its implementation. Because as the leadership, we do not force our ideology to communities. Excuse. We do not force the ideology to communities. Once you force an ideology, you force a program, it will be a disaster. This is why in the building of a national democratic economy, the first thing is that you must develop a national plan. And in the development of this national economic plan, there must be participation from the village level across the country, where villagers, guided by their own conditions, will develop their village plan. Then at a ward level, it is developed, a district, province, and then it becomes a national plan. So you can't gather in a boardroom, develop a national plan, and impose on the people. It will not work. So there must be participation, what is called participatory democracy. Our critics say communist parties, the leadership of communist parties are dictators. Were the most democratic people, members of the Communist Party. This is why we're guided by democratic centralism. President Nyerere said, I quote, "An Ujamma village is a voluntary association of people who decide of their own free will to live together and work together for their common good," close quote. That was the expectation when Ujamma was launched. But there were no takers. Few people were moving into Ujamma villages. And this meant that the program was not going to succeed. Later on, in 1976, President Nyerere changed the tack. He then said, I quote, "To live in a village is an order." This was now a declaration. In 1967, 1968, Ujamma villages were voluntary associations where people would volunteer to move to villages, to Ujamma villages. Later on, realizing that this was not working, it became an odd, and people were then forced to villages. People migrate from the village, as in our case. We've discussed migration in a number of videos in this channel. They migrate to villages for economic activity. When you then ask people to move to villages, you must first and foremost create conditions that will attract people to move from the city to a village. In any case, they must be part of this program. They must own the program if you want people to move from a city to a village, because it is their program which they own. It is not a government program. It's not a program driven by a few comrades in the party. But it is a program that is owned by the people. You will not face difficulties. So the lesson that we learn from Ujamma is that the concept was brilliant. We must underline this. The concept was brilliant, but the implementation was a huge challenge because members of the party themselves were not socialist. It was an assumption because the ruling party in Tanzania in the struggle for national liberation was supported by China and other socialist bloc countries. It did not automatically mean members were socialist or believed in the ideology for that matter. As I've already explained. So if we are to transit to the next stage of human development, which is socialism, our first task is to prepare the working class and the peasants so that when we transit, it is not the general secretary of the party, it is the collective, because it is a party program which then becomes a government program, a government of the people, by the people. So these were mistakes that were made. We always make this point that yes, indeed, mistakes were committed in the implementation of socialism in different countries. We are going to look into Mozambique. We are going to look into Burkina Faso and Comrade Sankara so that we give a balanced view. But what we always say is that mistakes were committed. But because mistakes were committed, it does not mean we have to abandon our ideology. No. We need to study the mistakes, correct those mistakes, and move forward. History does not move in a straight line. It zigzags. When I talk to my Christian friends, I always say to them, if a pastor or another Christian is found in the wrong, you don't bend the Bible. You correct the brother or sister who had gone astray. You don't say Christianity is wrong. You don't abandon your religion. So we'll not abandon our ideology of scientific socialism. We need to learn from those before us. But as I conclude, it's also important, which we always raise, that the task that we have as the Zimbabwe Communist Party is to develop cadres. Cadres will have the ability of breaking down our ideology to ordinary people. You cannot go to my village carrying branding the Communist Manifesto, quoting from it, thinking that people in the village will understand. No. So the reason why we're developing cadres is that cadres will be able to break down the ideology to the level of the people. This is very critical. This is why political education becomes king. Because if I go to my village, to my mom and her friends, I start telling them about Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, about what Lenin said when he was addressing the youth, they will not understand. But I need to break it down to their level so that they will begin to understand and appreciate and commit themselves to scientific socialism. Otherwise, comrades, please share your views, write your comments in the comment section, circulate this video. As I said, this is part of our political education targeting comrades that are inspired by the work that we do in communities who say they want to associate with the party. I have a comrade in Bulawa, is a lawyer, always says, Comrade Mapena, I need my associate card. I don't want to be a communist, but I want to associate with you. So we do have such in our society. So let's share this video with them and subscribe. Otherwise, comrades, Amandla.